Greetings from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This morning, I am so pleased to introduce you to an amazing young woman, the 38th State Treasurer of Kentucky, and the youngest statewide female elected official in the country, Treasurer Allison Ball. Treasurer Ball began her rise in conservatism at age 9 when she became a capitalist by forming her own business selling pencils. Her business blossomed so much that she continued with it throughout her career in college and then on to the University of Kentucky, go Blue, where she earned her law degree. She sold the business to her brother at a profit. Allison returned to her hometown after getting her law degree of Prestonsburg, Kentucky, in Floyd County in far eastern Kentucky, where her family can be traced back to the 1790s. Floyd County is 82% Democrat and only 14% Republican. Allison practiced law and began public service as an assistant Floyd County attorney. An avid supporter of the Kentucky Federation, Allison helped form a Republican Women's Club in eastern Kentucky, and she remains a member of the Fayette County Republican Women's Club today and is a tremendous supporter of the KFRW and NFRW throughout the state. Allison began her run for treasurer in 2014 while still living in Prestonsburg, population roughly 3,500 people. I remember seeing her in Frankfurt at a meeting of the KFRW and asking my friend Carol, who is she? Well, now I know, as does virtually everyone in Kentucky. Allison was part of the official slate of statewide candidates in 2014-15 who went on to win the Kentucky governor's seat, treasurer, commissioner of agriculture, and auditor. And the following year, we flipped our house for the first time in 95 years. Allison won the 2015 election by 61% and had the most votes of all of the candidates. Allison has affectionately been called the Energizer Bunny, a whirlwind, a tornado, and I think she drinks Red Bull for breakfast. But to Kentuckians on both sides of the aisle, she's known as the Good Allison. Please join me in welcoming Treasurer Allison Ball.
Oh, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home, and the young folks are rolling on the floor.
Good morning. Please sit down. I want to tell you why Barb made the reference of the Good Allison, because those of you who are not in Kentucky may not know why. We have another constitutional officer in Kentucky, and she ran against Senator Mitch McConnell a few years ago, and her name is Allison Lundergan Grimes. So I am the Good Allison in Kentucky, not to be confused with the other Allison. Well, this is a great honor, a great privilege to be here today. I have been so excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is I know that the greatest refutation, the greatest argument against what the Democrats say about the Republicans have a war on women is the women in this room. We always prove that there's no such thing as women's issues, there's people's issues. And we are the great answer to the Republican war on women. There is no war on women. So I've been so excited to be with you, and I want to tell you a few things about you, about the women in this room. I want to tell you why you all are so special, so important, why you are the secret weapon to the Republican Party and the whole country. And the first reason is, and these are things that I've noticed about women throughout the country, and the first reason is, and I'm going to get to it in a second, I learned how powerful Republican women are. From my own experience, I joined a Republican Women's Club first before I did anything else in politics, so that was the start. But then I saw firsthand as I traveled across Kentucky how powerful Republican women are. And I remember, we've got 120 counties in Kentucky. We're a small state, but we're still kind of a big state. It takes 8 hours to get from one end of the state to the other. And I remember having a conversation on the campaign trail 2 years ago with my campaign manager, Andy Hightower. And I remember Andy said to me, we were going to a particular county, and he said, have you talked to the party chair? And I said, oh, yes, I talked to him, and then went on. And Andy stopped me and said, no, wait a minute. When I ask you about a chair from now on, I mean the women's chair. Because if you want to talk to the people that you know are getting things done, that you know are making a difference, you just heard about all the volunteer hours throughout America. There's massive amounts of volunteer hours. If you want to talk to the people who you know are making a difference, you go to the women's chair. And I lodged that in my head, and I stuck with that the whole time that I was campaigning. I talked to the men too, of course, but I knew if I was going to get a hold of some of the Republican women, they were the ones who were going to maximize my message. So this is something I know firsthand from experience, but I want to tell you some things about you. What makes you special? Why are you important to the party? Why do you make a difference? And the first reason is because Republican women are goal-oriented. They're focused. They don't give up. They know what is important. They're goal-oriented. And it makes me think a little bit about that famous plaque that Ronald Reagan had on his desk, which was a reiteration of something that Harry Truman said. It's that it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And Republican women, yes, they work together. They don't care who gets the credit. They're not out it for personal glory. They're goal-oriented. They know what's at stake. They know what's important. They follow through on it. I recently saw a video on YouTube, and I'm going to commend this to you to pull this up, because this is pretty powerful. There's a woman in England right now, and some of you may have heard of her. She's the Prime Minister of England. Her name is Theresa May. She's not a Republican, of course. They don't have Republicans there. She's a conservative, and time will tell us what kind of a Prime Minister she'll turn out to be. We don't know yet. It's still early in her premiership. And you know, we have a great example of a great premier in England. We had Margaret Thatcher, one of the most solid conservative women in world history. And there are moments, if you watch Theresa May, where you can tell that she's channeling a little bit of Margaret Thatcher, that she's watched Margaret Thatcher and she's trying to be like her. And there's a moment that happened at a Prime Minister's Questions time a few months ago that exemplifies that goal-orientedness that I'm talking about, that we exhibit here in this room. And for those of you who may not know, the British have a system where the Prime Minister gets up once a week and the opposition gets to ask the Prime Minister questions. And the British are rowdy. It's like going to a Yankees game. They yell at the back. They talk a lot. They encourage. They cheer. They jeer. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy happens. Well, there was a Prime Minister's Question time shortly after President Trump got elected, and the opposition was grilling Theresa May about her support for some American principles, some things that England was doing to support America. And this guy was just giving her all these criticisms, going after one thing after another, and he finishes. So Theresa May gets her turn to stand up, and she stands up at a podium like this, and she sets her book down, and she starts to answer the opposition. And she's going through one by one, saying why they were supporting America in these different areas. And you can hear the people behind her, and they're starting to cheer, and they're responding to what she's saying. They're saying yes. And she finally gets to one pivotal moment, and she looks at the opposition leader, and she says, "You can lead a protest, while I am leading a country. I am leading a government." And I love that moment. You need to pull it up on YouTube because it's just like I described it. I love that moment because that's what we're like as Republican women. We are goal-oriented. You know, we get protested against, but it doesn't matter because we know what is important. We know what is right. And right now, we are the ones who are leading a country. We are the ones who are leading states. We are the ones who are leading governments. We need to stay zeroed in on that. Another important thing that I want you to know about you, about Republican women, is not only are you goal-oriented, but you don't give up. You are persistent, you persevere, you latch on, you don't give up. And this is something that's actually true about women leaders in every field. As I've studied women, and I've done a lot of time studying women leaders, this is a characteristic that you see pop up invariably. And I actually read something not that long ago about a woman in business. I'm gonna tell you this story, even though it's not about politics, because it's still true about you. This man was telling this story. He's a professor of business in Virginia. And he talked about at the end of one of his semesters, he went over to a group of seniors, end of a business class, and he went to one young woman in particular because she was really sharp. He'd always been impressed with her. And he came up to her and he said, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And she smiled real big and she said, "Professor, I've always had a dream of being the top realtor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've always thought it'd be so great to be a part of people's lives and they buy their houses. This is what I want to do with my life. And I've already signed up for the realtor exam." And this professor thought, okay, great. She's always been really sharp. She's going to do this. I've got a belief in her. And he said a few months went by, And he saw her just randomly out somewhere in Virginia, and he went up to her and he said, have you sat for the realtor exam? What's going on with your life? Have you started your business? And he said, she smiled real big, and she said, well, Professor, I'm doing really well, but I sat for the exam and I did not pass. But she smiled. She said, it's okay. I get to take it again in 1 year. So he thought, okay, great. To himself, you can do it. Sometimes you get setbacks. It's all right. And he said about a year passed, and he ran into her somewhere randomly, and he came up to her, and he said, hey, how are you doing? It's so good to see you. Did you sit for the exam? Have you passed the test? And he said, she smiled real big, like she always did, and she said, well, Professor, I sat for the exam, but no, I didn't pass it, but it's okay. I've already signed up for it again. In a year, I get to take it again. I still have this dream. And he said he walked away, and he thought, oh, boy, I hope she does it. And he said, true story, real life, he actually ran into her again one more time randomly in a mall somewhere. And he said when he saw her, he thought, oh no, do I go up to her this time? What do I do? And he said he just went over to her and he asked her, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? And he said she smiled real big and she said, Professor, I sat for the exam the third time and I passed it. And I still have this dream, I'm gonna make this happen. And the professor said he walked away and he thought, you know what, if there's anybody who can do this, she can do it because she doesn't give up. She holds on until she accomplishes what it is that she believes in, what it is she dreams about. And I love that story because, like I said, you see this in women in leadership in every field, and you especially see this for women in politics, women, Republican women. And they say, I just mentioned Margaret Thatcher a moment ago, one of the great conservative women of all time. They say that Margaret Thatcher's secret to her success was the fact that she did not give up. One of her deputies, a man named Lord Hurd, he was the minister to Europe, he was the foreign minister, he was the home secretary, pretty prestigious, important positions, and so he had a lot of opportunity to be around her. And he said, Margaret Thatcher, and this is an exact quote, he said, she wouldn't let go once she got hold of a subject. Once she'd mastered all the figures in her head, she would go on and on and on until through sheer exhaustion and exasperation, others gave her most of what she wanted. And I love that because, you know what? That's one way that we succeed because we're goal-oriented. We don't give up. We latch on until we succeed in the things that we believe in. And the third thing, and I'm really proud of this one. I can see this is true in this room. The third thing about Republican women, about you in this room, is that you are not afraid to be women. Women on the other side, a lot of times, they're afraid to be, yes, that deserves a clap. They seem like they're afraid to be women, or they're ashamed to be women, or they've got an issue with it. But as Republican women, we know that women bring a unique perspective. They bring something to the table that needs to be there. And just going back to Margaret Thatcher again, she exemplified this probably beyond almost anyone else in political history. There's a scene in the Meryl Streep movie, and this may be apocryphal. I don't know if this is true or not. But there's a scene in that movie where the people are coaching her and they're teaching her how to speak and some things to work on. And as they're going through a list of stuff, she says to them, the pearls are not negotiable. And I love that because you know what? She liked to look good. She liked to dress well. She knew that that was a part of who she was as a woman. And that didn't diminish her in her leadership at all. In fact, if anything, it enhanced her leadership because that's who she was, and she was confident in being that kind of a person. Thatcher herself said, and this is a quote I want you to really listen to, because this is about what women bring to the table. The woman's mission is not to enhance the masculine spirit, but to express the feminine. Not to preserve man-made world, but to create the human world by the infusion of the feminine element into all its activities. And isn't that a great quote? I love that. We bring something to the table. We need to be there as women and be confident in that. We bring something uniquely. And I told this story, I'm going to tell it again because I love it. I told this story to the NFRW board meeting in the spring. And one of my favorite writers of all time is a man named Paul Johnson, who was a speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher. And yeah, there's somebody knows Paul Johnson. And Paul Johnson described one time he was with Margaret Thatcher at a meeting, and she was getting ready to make an important speech, one that was significant on the world stage. And he was with her, and he said she was getting ready to go up, and there was a tunnel to go up onto the stage that she was going to speak on. And she stopped, and she said, oh no, because it was a wind tunnel, and her hair was perfect. And she told Johnson about what she was thinking, and he said, I've got an idea, follow me. So he stood in front of her, and he had a coat on, so he held this coat out like this, and he said she literally got down like this. she got down behind him, and they carefully walked along the hallway until she got through the hallway, and she got on the stage, and she gave a significant, groundbreaking, important, world-level speech that she needed to give, and she looked great while she was doing it. She was confident in being who she was, and that was important to her. And that's the kind of women that we are in this room. We're confident in who we are. We know we bring something to the table. And this brings me to my most important point. If you remember nothing that I've told about you and what's significant, remember this. Because you have these great qualities, you are goal-oriented, you're persistent, you are a woman, you bring something important to the table that is unique, that you need to give, that God made you to do. Because you have these things, we need you to assume a greater level of leadership. We need you to be running for office. We need you to be on the boards of various organizations at the state level, at the nonprofit level, at every level. We need you to be the party chair, not just the women's chair. We need you to develop your women's organizations into greater levels. We need you. I need you. The country needs you. Your states need you. We need you to assume a greater level of leadership. And I'm going to tell you something that you have probably heard before. There are all sorts of sociological studies that show that women typically don't run for office unless they've been asked. They say, you mentioned to a man, you know, you should run for office, or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I should do that. And when you say something to a woman, you know, would you ever like to run for office, and you kind of throw it out there, they consider to themselves whatever their qualifications are, and they usually self-disqualify themselves. And I heard Leslie Rutledge in the spring board meeting said one of my favorite things. Arkansas is happy. She was the first woman attorney general in the state of Arkansas, great leader, and she's young too. She said something that I thought perfectly answers the question of, are you qualified? And she said, this is what she says to people. She said when she was running, people would say to her, are you ready for the rough and tumble of politics? You know, you've been an attorney, but politics, that's mean. Are you ready for that? And her answer was, any woman who has survived junior high is ready for anything, that politics can throw at them. So the answer to that, when people mention to you, you should run for office, and you think to yourself, am I qualified? The answer is yes. Did you survive junior high? Everybody in this room has survived junior high. Yes, you are ready, you're qualified. You can handle anything that politics throws at you, and you're goal-oriented. You don't give up. You are a woman. You bring something unique to the table. You have what it takes to bring something to the political sphere, and I'm asking you to do it. And in fact, listen to me for a moment. They say women have to be asked. I personally am asking you in this room to assume a greater level of leadership. Consider yourself asked to assume a greater level of leadership. We need everybody in this woman to step up and to do these things. And I'm going to deputize you on another level too. So I've asked you personally, right? Assume a greater level of leadership. But I also want to ask you, and this is important, is that the women in this room are women of influence. You're leaders. You impact people. You make a difference. And we need you to ask other women to run for office. We need you to be on the lookout for women who show initiative, show spark, show some talent. We need you to spot them and encourage them. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. There's a young woman in my office who's 25 years old, and she's been in D.C. for a few years. She moved back to Kentucky not that long ago. She's gotten involved at her local party level, and she is sharp, very smart. And they just recently had their party chairman resign. I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. I wonder if anyone's going to talk to her about running for this position. And I watched, and I saw that this young woman, she ran their Lincoln Day dinner, and it was the most successful Lincoln Day dinner they've had in anyone's memory. Fantastic Lincoln Day dinner. And she's been running a lot of their party meetings, and I watched, is anyone going to ask her to run? And I observed that nobody talked to her about it. She did not run, and she probably should have just run on her own. This is one of the things I'm telling you about. You don't need to be asked. You're asked right now. I'm asking you. But nobody asked her to run, and somebody else ran, somebody else got it, somebody who I'm sure is qualified and is going to do a good job. But this young woman, when the other person got elected in that position, she told me about it afterwards. She said the person said to her, how do I run the meeting? And so this young woman explained to her, well, Robert's Rules of Order say this. Explained to him how to do it. And then they said to her, well, what should I do after this point? What should be my vision for the office? And she said, well, I think these are some things that we're doing well. These are some things we should be doing. And I thought, you know what? She's in the background doing all the things that we need a leader to do. And you all need to be on the lookout for those kinds of young women, middle-aged women, elderly women, whatever. There's women at all levels that we need to be pulling up. We need to be spotting them and asking them to run, asking them to do these things. And once they take those steps, we need to be encouraging them to do that. And here's something I really want to point out to you when it comes to encouraging, is that we need to make sure our wallet is behind our voice and our efforts when it comes to encouraging women in running for office. My husband, Asa James Swan, is over there. We've been married almost a year. In 2 weeks, it'll be a year. And Asa is a great supporter of women in politics. He probably knows more about women in politics than anybody in this room. And we had, as Barb mentioned earlier, Kentucky took over the state legislature for the first time in almost 100 years. Huge victory for us. And there were 10 Republican women in Kentucky who were running for office either against an incumbent or an open seat. So these were newbies, and they needed some encouragement. And Asa came up with the idea. He said to me, you know what? We support these people, and we're going out and telling people to vote for them, but we need to make sure our money is where, our wallet is where our money is. And Asa and I, really it was Asa's idea, put together a budget where we sent a check to every single one of those 10 women. And I got calls from every one of them and said that made such a difference to them to know that I was out there not only saying vote for you, but I was giving money to them as well. And we spend money on great things. You know, we've got elephants all over everything that we own. We have great stuff out in the hallway that we need to support and we need to buy, but we need to remember that our money needs to also make an impact at that level as well. So help us with doing that. We need to be focused on doing that. And the very last thing that I want to tell you when it comes to you all and your involvement is you have no idea the impact that you and your example makes on other women. There's a saying that you can't become what you don't see. And if we want people to run, you need to be the kind of women. There is no greater inspiration than another woman watching you succeed at what you're doing. So I want to ask you, go to your high schools, go to your colleges, go to your Sunday school classes, go to areas where you're around young women. Let them see you and the things that you believe in and the way that you're succeeding and the ways that you're making an impact, because that's going to inspire them more than words will, even more than money will. Right now in the United States, there are 21 women in the Senate. 16 of them are Democrats. 5 of them are Republicans. 5 of them are Republicans. There are 84 women in the House. 62 are Democrats. 22 are Republicans. They outnumber us. The women in there outnumber us almost 3 to 1. It's virtually 3 to 1. Women make up about 20% of politics. So women in general need to be in it more, but Republican women need to be in it even more. We have the talent. We have the goal-orientedness. We have the commitment, the persistent level. We are women. We bring something to the table. We need to be at the table. We need to be in office. We need to be in levels of leadership. We need to be doing these things. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you, tell you some things that are true about you, and encourage you. I am deputizing each one of you here today to go out there, assume a greater level of leadership, and encourage other women to do the exact same thing. Thank you for being here. I'm proud of you. We're making a difference.